Hello, everyone. I want to let everyone know that we are recording this and we have the media here. Once this is recorded, it is going to go on our website so that it can be watched. I know the room logistics is a little weird for those people online. You can't see me. The podium is in the back of the room, which is where the video will show up. So I am speaking from the front of the room at the moment, but when we get to questions at the end, we'll probably go to the back of the room so that it can be seen on the video for those who are online. And so I just want to thank everyone for coming today. I'm Rebecca Deming. I'm the new Community Development Director. I want to recognize those and thank those council members who are here today. Deputy Mayor Steinmetz, please stand and wave. Thank you. Council Member Oxiger. Council Member Mahoney. Council Member Harris, just saw you walk in. Did I miss anyone that I missed walking in? No? Okay, perfect. So as a background, this meeting is on the Sustainable Airport Master Plan, or SAMP, and the associated comment period for the environmental assessment, or EA, as we'll refer to it throughout the meeting. And this is the latest in the work done by the city and its consultants that started back around 2018 when the port and the FAA produced the scoping information. The city and the neighboring cities of SeaTac, Normandy Park, and Burien signed an agreement to work together to coordinate its response to the SAMP and the environmental documents. This process is also ongoing. The city submitted comments to the scoping back in 2018 for those that didn't know that. And then the pandemic occurred and this whole process slowed down, which is why we're finally here today. In 2024, the port and FAA, which is kind of one and the same in this process, released this EA. And we're currently in that comment period, which ends next Friday. So I'm going to turn this presentation over, which will go on the board here, to the city's consultants. So the port and FAA have nothing to do with this meeting. These are the city's consultants, which is Vianair and their representative, Jason Schwartz and Jim. I'll go ahead and turn it over.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jim Allerdice. With me tonight is Jason Schwartz and Emily Tranter, all part of the consultant team. I am the Chief of Consulting Operations for Vianair. My background is primarily air traffic control. So whenever, if and whenever we get to some of the flight procedure stuff, I'll be stepping in on that. But until that time, you're in Jason's good hands. His background is airports and community engagement. He's done community engagement for numerous projects. And he's also done environmental reviews for a number of cities and counties. So I'll let, first of all, I'll let Emily introduce herself. She also works on community engagement and government coordination side. So Emily, you want to say hi to everybody?
Hello, everybody. Emily Tranter. I'm based out in Washington, D.C. My firm, Primacy Strategy Group, focuses on community engagement and advocacy around aviation noise impacts. And I'm also the executive director of N.O.I.S E, which is the community, the elected officials, so community airport adjacent communities, national advocacy group on airport noise impacts. Thank you so much.
And then I'll turn it over to Jason. He can give you the background, and he's also got the presentation that he's going to do for you tonight. So Jason.
Thank you, and good evening, everybody. I'm going to try to share my screen. Please let me know if you can see that.
Yes.
That look okay on your end? Okay, great. Well, again, thank you for giving us the time to speak with you tonight. We're trying to keep our portion of the meeting to about 15 minutes, so I will probably be talking a little bit fast, just try to keep on track. The majority of the meeting we're hoping will be discussion and Q&A with you all. So just as was said, Vianair, or the team that you're working with tonight, uh, when we were hired in 2018 to provide review and comment on the scoping of the master plan, we were actually operating under different company names, but so if you look back at 2018, you'll see different company names, but the same names and faces. So we've been working on this project for quite some time. And again, our role in this, we're working directly for the city, and our role is really to advocate for the city and the residents, particularly those who are impacted by SeaTac Airport and the operations, and will be with the growth of operations as planned and forecast through the SAMP. So the information we're sharing for you, just to keep that in mind, the intent is to inform you all, hopefully help you provide meaningful comment on the EA. We'll get into the fact that there's an open comment period, which you're probably familiar with. We'll do a very brief overview of the SAMP in case anybody's not aware of what that is. We'll talk about the environmental assessment at a very high level, and then we'll get into the public comment and the next steps for what you can do to advocate for your communities. So real quick, as you probably know, the SAMP, or the master plan, focuses on let's see, 5 different functional areas on the airport. So you've got the land side, which is the roadways in and out of the airport. You've got work being done on the terminal building and inside the terminal building. You've got air cargo work being done to expand the capacity of the air cargo facilities, and also on the airfield. So you can see on that map, and I don't expect you all to know what all of that means, but just kind of giving an overview of what's being done. There's some taxiway enhancements, as you can see there. I will call out there is no runway projected or planned for at this time, so that's good news. And then finally, there's some work being done on the airfield related to fuel storage. All of what you see here, according to the environmental assessment and SeaTac, is being done to meet the future demand for operations at the airport. So they're not intending to increase operations. This is sort of based on your regional and metro area demographics and socioeconomics. They're expecting that demand at the airport will continue to grow, and these are intended to help meet that growth without too much delay and congestion around the airport. So like I said, purpose and need, it's basically a fancy way of saying, why are they doing this? And again, it really comes down to at least the purpose and need published by the airport is to meet the demand that's forecast for, say, 2032. They were at, pre-COVID, they had some delay. I guess it wasn't very bad. Then COVID hit and operations went down significantly. And as you probably know better than I do, operations are climbing back up. I think they're at pre-COVID levels now. And through 2032, they're expecting it to increase quite a bit. So all of these, or most of the purpose and need here in the projects are intended to address that demand. There are a couple of areas that are being done for safety purposes. Most of it's related to the growth in demand for use of the airport. This is that demand I talked about. On the left, the blue line is total annual flights, which is probably what you'd most care about. These are the flights that are going over your community and resulting in noise and the other impacts that you may be experiencing. The red line is actually passengers, which is a little bit less important in terms of what we usually hear from the community as far as impacts, particularly noise. But that increase in passenger traffic that you're seeing, or total passengers, will result in increases in surface traffic and congestion related to that growth. So you can see I rounded up a little bit, but there's approximately 20% increase from today's numbers in terms of total operations. That's over flights, landings, and departures, as well as total passenger volumes. That's a fairly significant amount of growth, as like I said, I'm sure you're all familiar with living in that area. A couple concepts just to make sure we're all talking from, we're all on the same level. Demand in the context of the EA, that's what SeaTac forecasts for how many people will want to utilize the airport services over time. So they'll say that there's a growth in demand. That means we're going to have more passengers flying in and out. We're going to have more cargo demand. So more people using Amazon Prime probably to bring packages in into the area. So that's demand. That's just how many people will want to use the airport over the next 20 years. Growth is the actual result of that demand. So we're thinking that the demand is going to be up 20%, and the growth is how many people are actually doing it. So they're interrelated there. Capacity, on the other hand, is just the amount of operations, takeoffs and landings, and then when we're talking about the terminal, how many passengers can be pushed through the terminal without too much delay or congestion. So capacity is just how much can the airport handle. Today, from the EA indications, congestion inside the terminal and on the land side, your roadways coming in and out, as well as on the airfield, isn't too bad. But if they reach the forecast demand, that 20% increase, the delay both in the terminal as well as in front of the terminal on the roadways and on the airfield will exceed FAA standards. So that's what they're trying to avoid. And delay is simply the amount of time that it takes between, or the difference, sorry, in the scheduled arrival time for an airplane and when it gets to the gate, or the opposite. You know, if you're scheduled to depart at noon and due to traffic on the airfield and congestion, you don't depart till 12:30, that would be a delay. So the capacity needs to increase in order to reduce the delay. Hopefully that makes sense. The important piece here is to understand from the airport's perspective and the EA perspective, the near-term projects that they're trying to do as part of the master plan does not trigger the growth, right? They're saying and they're forecasting that the growth is going to happen based on a strong economy, and as the demographics of your region and population increases, so will the demand. So the purpose of these projects is not to increase those operations. They're saying that will happen either way. They're just doing these things in order to not have increased delay that will make the airport quality of service go down. Real quick overview of the NEPA process. As you can see, it's quite complex. I just wanted to highlight the two comment periods there. We're on the one on the bottom right now, where the FAA and the airport have completed the environmental assessment. They've assessed the impacts and identified those impacts that can be mitigated. And now you have the opportunity now to provide comment as far as the assessments, the analyses, and also the mitigations that are in place to make sure that everything was considered, that the impact analyses are accurate, to the best of your ability, and then to comment on areas that you think were not assessed properly or that need further impact mitigation. The areas that we were asked to focus on primarily were these four: air quality, groundwater, ground transportation, and aircraft noise. Noise is kind of my favorite one to talk about, so I left that for last. As far as air quality, really all four of these, the environmental assessment suggests that some of these categories do have impact levels that exceed what's acceptable by federal regulations. And for each of those, they will be, the intent is that they will be mitigated. So looking at groundwater as an example, there were some areas where streams that exist today will be impacted. They'll be filled in. So those streams may have to be diverted or somehow else managed, mitigated. Similarly, for ground transportation, the EA talks about or identifies a large number actually of intersections and roadways around in the surrounding communities, including yours, that the existing capacity on those roadways will not meet the forecast growth. So by 2032, when the increase at the airport is realized, the surface transportation and congestion in those adjoining cities will be higher than it should be, and so that needs to be mitigated. So using that as example, the port has stated that it will be mitigated through working with those jurisdictions. So in the case of Des Moines, they will work with your Department of Transportation, or your civil engineers to ensure that mitigation is put in place so you don't have an exceedance of congestion that has a negative impact on the community as far as ground transportation and congestion. The aircraft noise bit is a little bit more difficult to address. There are, without getting into too much detail, the FAA, per federal regulations, deals with the day-night noise metric, which you've probably heard of, DNL. Most people hate it. DNL is how they are required to assess aircraft noise exposure around airports. And in the environmental assessment, they did find that at the 2032 operational levels, there will be an increase in the DNL noise exposure level exceeding 65 DNL in some areas, which is the federal standard for what's acceptable or not in terms of residential areas. However, under NEPA, there's criteria that say things like if the existing noise exposure level is 65 decibels, and you increase it less than 1.5 dB, it's not an exceedance of that NEPA threshold. So that's I'm kind of trying to figure out how to explain this in the most simple way possible. But the bottom line is they're saying, and the EA suggests that there are no exceedances beyond federal thresholds under the National Environmental Protection Act. So there's no impacts that need to be mitigated. There is a growth in the 65 DNL exposure, as I mentioned, and that will be mitigated through a different program. Hopefully you're familiar with the Part 150 noise compatibility planning process. There's a study going on at SeaTac right now to assess the existing aircraft noise levels around the airport and in the adjacent communities. And through that process, they will address the noise issues. But in terms of the environmental assessment, there's nothing in there that would exceed acceptable increases in noise exposure. We'll talk a little bit more about the 150 in a minute. As far as the public comment process, a couple of things to highlight here. The official public comment period is closing December 13th. So we would certainly encourage all of you to provide comment and get it in before that deadline. Comments can be provided through the EA project website. There's a link there, and I believe we're going to be providing a copy of this presentation in a PDF for you, so we can get you that link. In addition, the city will be providing comment on behalf of the city council, and they would like to also include public comment in that submission to the port. So hopefully after I'm done with the presentation, we'll have time to get your input on what your concerns are, what your comments are. And again, that'll be rolled up into the city's comments to the port as part of the EA public comment. We're also working on a template that'll make it a little bit easier for you to provide your public comment. We'll provide that. We're still drafting it, but it should be ready by Monday, and it'll be available on the city's website, I believe, for download, and then you can use that for your submission. And then, as I said, comments and concerns discussed today will also be included in the city's submission to the port. As far as providing meaningful comment, this is really key. A lot of times, public comment related to especially noise issues, but really any airport environmental issue, it's obviously an emotional issue and can be very frustrating for folks. The most important thing I can say, besides getting your comment in on time, so please do make your voice heard, it's keeping it really logical and objective, right? So you don't want to, I mean, I've seen public comment where people are just cursing at the airport and the FAA and the pilots. It's just not effective. Believe me, I've worked on both sides of the noise issue. I was an airport noise manager for many years. And I've also worked on the consulting side, working for communities for many years. I understand the frustration, but what we want to do is take this opportunity for public comment and to make sure that the comments are heard and understood and not just discarded. So your best bet is to really focus on your concerns very specifically. So how is it impacting you? And if possible, focus on the SAMP, the Sustainable Airport Master Plan, and the EA. The biggest issue that I have found or concern I have is the growth in operations as we've talked about, and then the subsequent impacts that you're going to see based on that. So the increase in surface traffic, the increase in noise, those types of things. I know the third runway was a hot issue for you all, and I'm sorry that occurred the way it did. And you know, I understand that the port has really burned a lot of trust with the community, but I would caution you to focusing on that since they're not asking for a comment on it, and really focusing on here's where we are today, and here's what this increase in noise is going to do for my family or my home, and ask them, you know, encourage them to acknowledge that, to understand that, and then to work with the city of Des Moines to address those impacts and manage that growth in truly a sustainable way. It's called the Sustainable Airport Master Plan, and I would want to encourage them to make sure that sustainability includes working closely with residents and the local jurisdictions. Let's see. The EA identifies specific impacts to the airport adjacent communities. One of the things that I would say is they talk about mitigation plans, like I mentioned, the surface congestion, I mentioned noise. In your comments, you might want to say, you know, encourage them to work closely, in this case with Des Moines, to understand from the city officials and staff, what are the concerns for Des Moines, and let's work together to make sure that those are truly mitigated, right? We don't just want to check a box and say, well, we did what we needed to do. As far as the port, really work with these local communities. You are the neighbors. It's all one neighborhood, the way I look at it. SeaTac is part of your community, and so I would encourage them to act as such. And then finally, with noise, the biggest challenge I see for communities related to aircraft noise is the fact that we use this DNL metric that really doesn't reflect the community's experience. So a 20% increase in operations, according to the environmental assessment and the noise assessments that were done, it's going to expand the area covered or exposed to what the FAA would consider significant noise a little bit. There's a small increase in terms of the noise contour, we call it. That's the land around the airport that's exposed to that 65 DNL level noise. However, I would argue that a 20% increase in operations is more impactful for the resident experience, and it's going to go much further out than the 65 DNL contour. So what we recommend is the use of supplemental metrics. When Vianair does work with communities, we always use supplemental metrics, which just don't look at DNL. We also look at metrics that the community can understand or relate to. For example, the number of events above a specific threshold. So how many times at my house do I hear an airplane overflight today, right? So let's say I'm getting 40 a day. How many will I hear after this 20% increase? And if that's going to go up to, I'm trying to do math in public, let's say it goes from 50 to 65 events a day, you can understand what that's going to be. Or you might want to know the number of events at nighttime. So if today I'm getting 10 events between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., how many with your future forecast will I be getting overnight? So using metrics that the community can understand and relate to, I think is important, not only for community information, but also I would encourage the port to use that information when they're assessing the impacts, and make sure that that's part of their mitigation planning. So don't just use it to inform the community and say, here's what you're going to get. But no, we understand that that's an increase, and that's going to that's going to impact your quality of life. So here's what the port is going to do in terms of airspace or flight procedures in order to reduce the impact, and again, to enhance the quality of life for your communities. In terms of next steps, these are some of the things that we're recommending, and we'll be working with Des Moines to help sort of put a path forward together. But local jurisdictions, including Des Moines, really should encourage development of mitigation plans. Like I said, the EA, the environmental assessment, talks a lot about, we'll work with the cities to mitigate these different impacts. And so I would encourage Des Moines to work with those cities and work with the port in order to specifically identify mitigation plans and make sure that the community is satisfied with those. And then make sure that the port follows through with that commitment. Monitoring the implementation of the near-term projects is critical. The EA is sort of a snapshot in time based on the planned project. So once the projects are construction begins and ground is broken, you'll want to continue to monitor, make sure that was looked at in the EA is actually what's happening. If there's significant changes from that original plan, then the impacts could also change. So you'll want to continually monitor and track what's going on and make sure that things are as they were planned. SeaTac has initiated that Part 150 study, which I mentioned. That's again where you assess the noise exposure for the existing conditions and then what's it going to look like. Usually they look at 5 to 10 years in the future. And you come up with strategies to reduce those impacts. That's really a critical program, and the cities and residents should take part and monitor that progress and really participate in that. There's multiple opportunities for community input during the Part 150 process, and I would strongly encourage you to monitor that and to provide your input as that project moves forward. And finally, leveraging the existing, so the airport has the Seattle Stakeholder Advisory Roundtable, which Des Moines is a part of, and also the Part 150 has a technical review committee, which you also have representatives on. So I encourage you to engage the city to keep up to date on what's going on with those two committees, as well as participating where public engagement is permitted. And those are great opportunities to make sure that the needs and the impacts for Des Moines are understood by the port and addressed properly. Okay, so I probably went over my time. I apologize. We wanted to have some discussion and public comment. These are just some prompts on kind of what we're hoping to focus on. And I'll turn it back over to Rebecca.
Thank you. So as was mentioned, this is meant to just be an hour. We do want to collect everyone's comments. So in the back of the room, we do have a handout that has how to comment, but it also has a city email address to send your actual concerns. So we want to make sure that in this meeting, we keep it to questions, specifically questions about, if you have a question about how to comment or a question about specifically a concern about the presentation or how to comment in a meaningful way. So if you have an actual concern you want to let us know about to include in our comment, we were asking for you to put that in writing and email that to us. And we have that email here. And we also have that email on the website that we've created and that will get posted. And as was mentioned, we will have a template letter that you will be able to use, and that will be up by Monday for you to send directly to the port with that address. So that handout's in the back of the room. We will start with the questions in this room in person, and then we will move online. And so if you have a question specifically, and again, I'm asking for questions and not comments, please reserve your comments to the email. Please get in line up here and come and ask your question, and we'll start in the room and then we'll go to online. If you raise your hand on the Zoom, we'll call you, but we'll start with the in-person questions. Thank you.
So my first question would be, what has been done to engage young people from our community who were affected? I live right next to the high school. And this morning when I woke up, as I was getting ready for work, I counted a plane every minute for like in succession until I got tired of counting at 7:30. That kind of learning environment for the young people in our community is a real inequity that our community bears the burden of. And so I'd like to know what's been done with students to make sure that their voice is heard, and not just about mitigating indoor noise pollution. We need our kids to get outside, to be healthy in the outdoors. So what are we doing to ensure that they have that environment?
So you speak about mitigation. My question is, the mitigation equals economics, and who is going to bear the burden of financing the mitigation in all these 4 or 5 areas that have been identified.
To some of those questions. Jason, can you respond to the question about who would fund the mitigation, please?
Yes, so that would be funded by the port as part of this project. The mitigation would come through the port.
And as it relates to the first comment about young people and the impacts on, students and youth in the community, I think that's a terrific comment to include in your comment letter to the FAA.
Hi, my name is Linda Akey. I am a Burien City Council. I'm a Burien City Councilwoman. Sorry to crash the party in Des Moines, but I wasn't able to attend all of the meetings that they had the previous week. So thank you. My question has to do with my understanding that the SAMP plan has not recognized some of the roadways that are impactful to the airport. And one of those roadways is the expansion of 509. And this expansion is going to increase traffic significantly around the airport. So my question is the comments that we'll be able to make also going to be for what we believe are exclusions in the SAMP plan, or can we only comment on things that are identified within the SAMP plan, such as the 509 expansion?
I would,
well,
did
Jason,
you want me to
yeah.
respond to these?
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be helpful if you can do a brief response to people while they're here.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I would absolutely recommend you, if you see something that wasn't covered or is omitted or wasn't covered sufficiently, I would absolutely note that in your comments to the port that I'm not familiar with 509, not being from that area, but if that's not addressed as a traffic issue that's going to be addressed, I would absolutely comment on that as something that was missed in the environmental assessment.
Hi, my name is Sandra Locklear. I've been a Burien resident for 50 years and certainly have experienced my share of increasing air pollution as well as noise. I didn't hear anything about air quality tonight. I heard a lot about noise. Our major airport pollutants of concern, we have air toxics, carbon monoxide, nitrogen dioxide, sulfur dioxide, ozone, and ultrafine particulate matter. There's been major significant studies done by the UW, the Washington State Department of Health, and King County that shows the South End has statistically significant poor health than the rest of King County. The last air quality study done was in 1996. It only costs you guys $500,000 to do a dispersion analysis using models or air quality studies using physical instruments. And these two tests validate and support each other. The EPA wants to know what's going on in surrounding communities, site-specific receptors, schools, nursing homes, daycares, et cetera. I want to know why you are skipping over the idea of air quality and just focusing on noise. And is that because you might be, the airport as it stands now might be violating the Clean Air Act? So I want everyone to know that I've written an article. It's going to be published tomorrow in the Burien News. And it is entitled, "How do we know if the SAMP is really sustainable? Would you like to know the level of dangerous chemicals from the airport that might be violating the Clean Air Act in your neighborhood now?" What the SAMP won't tell you. What they also won't tell you is everyone needs to write the FAA, the Port of Seattle, and the EPA. And I have listed those email addresses in my article because we need your comments to be transparent. Let it all hang out. There shouldn't be any strict guidelines about your commentary. We the people. You are the public. Let it all hang out. Write all three entities. CC everybody. Okay? Thank you. The issue of airport air pollution. Why are you skipping over that? That's my question. There's so much behind it.
I'm happy to address that if the staff would like.
Yeah, please do. And also just as a reminder for everybody, Jason and Emily are not with the port. They are consultants hired on our behalf. So, they are not responsible for not doing that, but, the comment is well received. So yeah, Jason, do you want to tackle that?
Yeah, the short answer is we didn't skip it. It was one of the 4 areas that we were asked to focus on. As you may or may not know, I think we had 3 weeks notice that from the port that the review, or sorry, the comment period, it was very abbreviated and there's a lot of content. Anybody that looked at the EA and the SAMP knows there's a lot of documentation there. So we did go through it. As I recall, for the air quality, they said it didn't exceed air quality standards. I did mention that during my briefing of that slide. I'm not an expert in air quality. I reviewed the analysis and I have to basically take it at face value because I don't have the equipment or the time to come out and double check the work or to model it. So I agree 100%. If they're not doing an adequate job of the assessment of the air quality impacts, definitely comment on that. And we're not discouraging you to say your piece in any way. I'm just encouraging, if you want meaningful comment that can actually change things, just try to really stick to the facts and not get, stick to the facts. That's just a recommendation, but we're certainly not trying to censor anybody.
Yes, my name is Joe Dusenberry. I live on North Hill. I'm one of the city's representatives to the STAR committee. This is a comment and a question for you, Jason. About noise, I've noticed in attending the STAR meetings that the port does, they have a very extensive monitoring program for noise. And we get regular reports, again, pretty detailed reports about the number of exceedances, and they break it down by the airline and cargo versus passenger, all kinds of data. But the program is totally voluntary. And the report is they report out to the airlines every 3 months. So if there's an exceedance, it might be 3 months before they sit down and talk to the airlines about it. So we can get involved in this process and we can have all kinds of input about noise. But if the whole program, the whole way they measure this and enforce it is totally voluntary, how effective is that going to be? And my another question is, in your experience, are there other airports in the country that have noise monitoring programs where there's actual teeth to the enforcement of those exceedances? And that's one of the disadvantages we have, even at START, is we get zero information about what other airports are doing. We know a whole lot about what SeaTac's doing. We get endless reports, but we don't know how that compares with what other airports are doing. And I think that's pretty important information.
Great. I could actually respond to that question for an hour because it's one of my favorite topics is noise and fly quiet. I know I'm limited on my time, so I'll just say to answer the question, generally speaking, the flight procedures and the noise abatement procedures are voluntary per federal regulations. There are some ways to add teeth to that. For example, designing flight procedures that are specifically community friendly or noise abatement friendly. And then when the air traffic controllers assign that to the pilot and the pilot flies it, it will be the procedure that you're looking for. Fly quiet programs like the one you're describing are typically voluntary. As a company, we do work in the fly quiet program space, and more importantly, as a noise manager, I've developed programs for airports that I was working for. I'd say that there are ways to improve the program. What you're describing, the 3-month report, is not the way that I would recommend it be done. I'd be happy to talk to to you offline or talk through staff to explore that further. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to take up too much time, but I understand what you're saying, and there are definitely ways to improve that situation and the effectiveness of Seattle's program.
I will say real quickly, as a part of the initial SAMP review that we did on the front end, we did do some modeling and make some recommendations for flight procedure changes to mitigate noise. So those are out there and a part of this process already. If you are not familiar with them, you can go back to the original documentation and look and make comments on that if you like what you see.
Hi, my name is Susan White, and I've been a longtime resident of Des Moines. And I was also part of the third one-way battle. At the time, all the cities were all kind of more united in a way, I guess. But it is really true. It's like, it just seems like we send in all these comments, and we've done this for over so many years. And who's really listening? It seems like we go through these processes. We also see these studies. I don't know how many millions of dollars are spent on these, but at some point, I think we all feel we're just not heard. And, grateful that you are representing the city and that, we're all here tonight, but I hope somebody is listening because it's true, the air quality. My grandchildren went to St. Phil's. I mean, there's airplanes every 2 seconds dropping all this pollution everywhere, right over that school. So many of us are impacted and we do need help. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Will Scharf. I've been a permanent resident of Des Moines for 24 years. This question is directed to Jason Schwartz. I see that there's been a lot of refinement around this 25 decibel metric for the magnitude of the noise. What I heard you also talk about was a frequency. So you're using a more community-friendly metric talking about the frequency of noise. What I didn't hear was the thresholds around what those metrics are. So where can I find the information on the thresholds for the frequency of noise, not the magnitude of the noise?
Yeah, so I mentioned supplemental metrics. There isn't a specific standard. There's not a federal standard for I'm sorry?
Why not?
I can't speak to federal government and what they do and don't do, right?
Obvious question. They have one very highly refined metric, which you give them, there's a 1.5 grace period there. From 65, you can go up to 66 and a half. So it's been very refined, but they're overlooking the frequency. That's a huge gap.
I mean, technically, and I'm not an advocate for the FAA, but technically they would argue that the DNL metric does include frequency and magnitude into one. If you increase the frequency, the DNL will get larger. I'm not personally in favor of using DNL, but they don't ask me for input. That's FAA and your congressional representatives that can change that metric.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of work over decades to study those metrics and to advocate for increased, to have standards for different kinds of metrics beyond the DNL. And I can tell you that advocacy has been consistent for decades, and the FAA is still only using DNL. So I think there's a lot of folks that that are impacted, like you and your neighbors, and there are a lot of folks that are in the advocacy space that have been talking about this for quite a long time. And to your question of why not, I mean, I think it is a very complicated, long process, and we are, I think we wish we'd made more progress on it at this point, but that's just what our federal standards are right now. So, but certainly your voice is not alone in asking for the federal government to expand metrics and how they measure noise.
But if these supplemental metrics are being used to inform and educate the communities, how are we supposed to interpret that? To the gentleman's point earlier, what are the best practices across other airports? We need some additional context, because if you just come out and say, here's these supplemental metrics. Great, is that good, bad, indifferent? We need that context. If there's no thresholds that have been established by the FAA, you're telling a community something that has absolutely no meaning. How do we interpret the data? You're telling them the data, but how do we interpret that? So that's my piece.
Thank you.
And I'll take a stab at that too. One of my favorite phrases is once you've seen one airport, you've seen one airport, and once you've seen one community, you've seen one community. We blanket the DCA area now at all 3 airports. The supplemental metrics that we use are in conjunction with the communities and what they feel is meaningful to them, since there is no national standard. However, one of the metrics that we use quite often is number of events above 55 decibels. That seems to be a pretty widely accepted metric. And the reason for that is 55 decibels is less than the 65 DNL. It's a lower threshold. And so the number of times an individual observer or a point is affected by that decibel level or higher seems to be a good method of comparing noise specifically before and after a mitigation. One of the things that we just got done doing at DCA Airport, and they just did some modifications at Baltimore, Washington Airport as well. And we're in the process of doing a before and after comparison using those metrics because they're more meaningful to the community than DNL. And it's I won't say universally accepted, but for the communities that we've worked with, it seems logical to them, and it's been an effective metric for the community to understand what the impacts are.
I've got 3 people here in line in the room, and then I want to switch to the online people. So let's keep it to those 3 people that are in the room currently.
Hi, I'm Morris Gene Westgard, and I live on 246, which is just a little south of Highline Community College and about maybe 30 yards below an elementary school. And it is noisy. I'm 1 mile walk to Saltwater State Park, and all the campers and people complain about the noise down there. I'm going, well, you need to come to my house. Yeah, and it's, I don't know, it's every few minutes, and you cannot talk on the patio because you can't hear the person on the other side of the table. It's pretty bad. And thinking there's a school just, 30 yards above me, and Highline schools, they're closer to the airport. So that it's an issue, and and I like to hear it. So please help us.
Hi, my name's Bill Linscott. I live down in the Marina District here. I did a lot of flying during my career, and I only found one airport where I observed noticeably methods that reduced the sound and noise, and that was Orange County, California. They take off, they get up, they throttle back until they're out over the ocean. Now, is that some of the procedures that might have been mentioned in your recommendations when you talked about changes in procedures that address noise? Particularly at night, I would think that kind of thing would be helpful. And I'm not sure how Orange County pulled that off, if it's a voluntary thing. So I've several questions around that operation there. Is anybody familiar with that?
Yeah, I can start with that. So Orange County is unique. It's been brought up quite a few times, and Jason can speak more to the legalities of what's going on there. But the FAA nationwide has 2 standard noise abatement departure procedures. NADP 1 is a noise abatement departure procedure in close to the airport. And NADP 2 is a noise abatement departure procedure that helps out further away from the airport. One of the things that we do when we go in to study an airport is compare those two and find out which one would be better for that particular airport or that particular runway at that particular airport. So we do those studies to see which ones are more effective. The one that they're doing at Orange County is more akin to the NADP 1, which is close in to the airport, that gets them higher sooner and throttles back. That is a national standard, and they do use that at various airports and or various runways. The specifics of Orange County, that was, and Jason can speak to the legality of that, but that was prior to, what was that act that they did, Jace?
The Airport Noise and Capacity Act.
That one, yeah. So, and before that, there was like curfews that they could have in place and stuff like that. They can't do those things nowadays because the federal government says basically, if we give you money at your airport, then you've got to keep your airport open at all hours and all times and let anybody come and go that wants to come and go. And everybody takes money from the federal government. So for whatever reason, Orange County is unique and they're grandfathered in because they already had it when that act was passed. And now nobody else can get the same thing. There's a minuscule chance, via one vehicle that you can go and jump through hoops and try for years and years and years, but nobody's been able to tackle that since that airport existed, or that act existed, and spent millions and millions of dollars trying, but nobody's been able to get what Orange County has. So but the good news is there are other mitigations, and we've been very effective at implementing those at various and sundry airports. So it's possible to get some meaningful, measurable mitigations.
And are those in your recommendations? Have you made those? Are we making those in our recommendations, those kinds of procedures?
Yes, we did. At the beginning of the SAMP, we made recommendations, and it's in the documentation that we had already submitted. We can refer back to that and bring it up again, because we did look at flight procedures. We did look at changing things to affect less of the communities and turn aircraft in specific places that would mitigate noise for a lot of people. And those recommendations were made at the beginning of the process, and in the comments, so we can bring it up again and say, hey, don't forget that was something that we already told you.
I think that'd be a good idea. The thing, as a resident, I wouldn't know how to make that kind of comment as an individual. I would like to make it. So maybe one of the things you could do is give us something we can use as a comment and get it in by the 13th. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I had 3 questions, but I'm just going to ask one, so online people have a chance to. I'm Stuart, and question is, who is actually reading the comments that we submit?
That's the FAA.
Are they actually going to pay any attention to them?
That's the FAA and the port. And according to the NEPA process documentation, they read that and consider that in their decision making as far as whether the EA should stand on its own and or if it needs to be escalated to an EIS.
The analogy here is it's like the judge, the jury, the prosecutor are all the same. And it's really discouraging to think about this. Is there any way around this process?
Well, I wanted to just mention that, I think what you all are doing here tonight is not necessarily a way around the process, but it is a really, really impactful and meaningful way to engage in the process. Your elected officials holding this meeting, the staff of the city, engaging at all levels of government, with your elected officials at the local, state, and federal level, is really a way to ensure that as communities, individuals, and cities themselves comment at the FAA that those are being elevated, and that the oversight of Congress and your elected officials at all levels of government are aware that this is happening, and you've got those advocates. That is a really, really positive way to engage in this, because the federal government, is engaging with their counterparts. And so part of their job is to advocate on behalf of their residents. And so making sure that they're aware of the issues and aware of the engagement from the community up is a really vital part of this process.
And I will add on to that, the young lady earlier that was commenting about she's going to do an article and copy everybody. So when you submit your comments to the port, copy your congressman, copy your senators, copy your local and state government on your comments that you submit, so that it gets proliferated throughout. So because those are the folks that are going to provide the oversight to the FAA ultimately.
Yep.
Sandy Hunt, I'm a defender of Highline Forest, formerly defender of North SeaTac Park. And my question is around the kind of continuity, or how much should other documents that the port produces on land use match with this? Because, for example, they have a 2020 real estate strategic plan, and the maps there have comment that south of the airport between South 200th and South 207th, properties are now under the purview of the Sustainable Airport Master Plan, and there's proposal in that to cut down forests, but that isn't showing up in the maps that they presented in the schools and online. And that also there's maps that if you dig deeper, like click, 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 you get to maps that have different pieces of property that look like they're under potential development that aren't showing up when you click on the map that's on the first page of the website. So do you have any insight into how those things all work together?
Hypothetically, they should all be consistent. So I would say if you're finding inconsistencies there, then there's the potential that the total impacts haven't been appropriately considered. So I would include that in a comment as part of the EA public comment process to make sure that that's addressed.
Sam Mendes. We can't hear you. I'll come back to you. Steve, iPhone?
Hi there. You hear me?
Yes.
So it appears that this EA environmental assessment has been in the works for about 6 years, and we've just been released the preliminary report about a month ago. Why is the window so short for review? Can we ask for an extension?
Did you guys want us to take that, or did you want to address it?
The city has requested an extension. We asked for a total of 90 days. They have given us a 1-week extension.
It really should
was
be more like
originally due
6 months
December
to go
5th.
through over thousands of pages of this document.
We concur.
Which I don't trust the Port of Seattle nor the FAA to have done it properly. I believe there's a lot of misinformation in there to keep this from getting turned into a full environmental impact statement, which is wrong.
Yeah, and unfortunately, they didn't give us a big extension. We are continuing our efforts. Emily is working in the background day and night to try to get a further extension through all her means and contacts with government.
Yeah, that's a van. So
Yeah,
smaller
there
than
you
a
go,
school
Sam.
bus.
Sam, you're live now.
Yep, Sam, you're on.
And so we're continuing to work on that. We concur that the period was very short. That's definitely going to be part of our comments that we forward up to the FAA, that you really didn't give us a heck of a lot of time to look into this, review, go back and do some analysis on their analysis. So the window is extremely short. You are correct.
Thank you.
I'm back to Sam.
Was that back to me?
Yes.
Okay. I apologize for the sound issues. That's my toddler watching Mr. Rogers. I want to thank you all for the presentation. My name is Sam Mendes. I'm a Burien resident. I was just wondering if you could provide advice on how best to frame a question around the air pollution. I was interested in the presentation that it showed that there was anticipated increase in emissions or pollution, but it was, within the standards, and I think particularly that 1050 order 1050.1F FA order. But the point also didn't necessarily say like what the actual increase would be expected. It just kind of said, well, it's within range, but it didn't actually say how much of an increase of pollution we could actually anticipate. Because if we're looking at a 20% increase in activity of flights, I would imagine, a commensurate high level of increase of pollution as well. So I guess back to the question about how best to phrase the question, is there data out there that we could find to include, with the spirit of this being just the facts? And if the answer is, maybe it's there, if there isn't the data, maybe how best could we frame a question on seeking clarity on what those emissions would look like? Thanks.
Sure. The data is in the environmental assessment. There's a section on impacts, and I'm forgetting I think it's environmental consequences, something like that. But it does delineate specifically for each of the key emissions or the pollutants. It tells in there, describes exactly how much they forecast it will go up. As part of our tasking for the city, we're going to be providing a sort of a semi-technical report in which we will talk about, or we'll describe or articulate those increases in those 4 key environmental impacts. So that will be available to you for review. We haven't, based as was previously said, there's so much content in the EA, we haven't had enough time to get all of it done. So we worked on the presentation for tonight first, and then we'll be working on the completing the report, which should be out hopefully next week.
And again, I believe that other young lady that's writing the article was specific about some studies that had been done that she's going to put into her article, and I think that would be a good place to look too, because she made some very specific references earlier this evening.
Thanks. Really quick follow-up is, are we able to interface with you directly for documents like that, or is it sort of just these meetings here?
The template will be put on our website, so you'll need to interface with the city email that will be put on the website.
Okay, thank you.
We're out of time. We've got the 2 remaining that are on the website. And so the next person is Kate Richardson.
Hi, thank you. I live for 38 years on Gregory Heights, which is 3 miles as the crow flies from the 3rd runway. And I'd like to know what entity or entities determine when the airport has reached its carrying capacity such that no further growth is possible. Or can communities look forward to being mitigated out of existence?
I can take a crack at that. So the absolute capacity of an airport is dependent upon the runways. How much concrete an airport has is what determines the ultimate capacity of the airport. The other piece that is involved with that is air traffic separation standards. Now, exactly what that is, I can't calculate, but there is a finite level at which they cannot exceed under current technology, current separation standards, and current runway capacity. I don't know what that number is off the top of my head, but it's just not physically possible to continue to grow exponentially forever. So the answer to your question is there is a limit. I just don't know what that is right now.
Is it something we can find out?
It is calculable, yes.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I would say, there's constraints related to the capacity of the airspace, as we talked about the air side, runways, taxiways, the terminal, and the land side. The unfortunate answer, and I'm just being completely honest, what airports will typically do in conjunction with the FAA is to continue to expand capacity to meet demand. So if your demand continues to go up, the airport in conjunction with the FAA would want to continue to expand capacity to meet that regional demand. Whether that's right or wrong, I'm not commenting on, but that's basically how things work. That's why you see the third runway added. That's why you see airfield enhancements and terminal enhancements. They're trying to meet that demand.
And what is the voice? What is the voice coming from that has that demand? Is that business? Is that what it is? Wall Street or who? Who is that?
Yeah, really, they just look at the number of passengers that are utilizing the airport currently, historically, and also the number of or the volume of cargo coming in and going out. So they kind of look at the historical demand and then they forecast based on economic factors and demographic factors. For instance, the population of the Seattle metro area and however wide the region is that uses SeaTac. So I'm not sure how far south you would, they call it a containment area. So like maybe Longview and north would go to SeaTac versus going down to Portland, something like that. So it really depends on the population growth projections and the economy as far as how much they will, try to grow and increase capacity.
Alyssa?
So that was, oops, sorry. That was a good segue. My question is this, the SAMP, sorry, I'm Elisa Ralph with Burien, and thanks for including other cities. The premise for the SAMP revolves around increased demand for cargo and passenger planes. So I guess my question is there a legal requirement to meet the demand? I mean, aside from safety and environmental concerns, is there a legal requirement to always meet demand just because it's there? In other words, saying no, I assume for some reason is not an option. Because if being required to meet the demand is the law, then I think as a side activity, we should all be writing our elected federal and state officials and say there needs to be some changes to the rules. But is that actually what is requiring the port to respond to increased demand projections?
So I'm not an attorney. My understanding, having worked in this area for a long time, is the FAA, there are standards for acceptable levels of delay, as an example, on the airfield. So if your flight, due to congestion on the airfield, aircraft taxiing in and out from the runways, if the congestion is so great that it increases delay past a certain amount, then the FAA expects you to expand the airfield capacity. I can't tell you that it's required or that if you don't do it, would your federal funding for airport projects be in jeopardy? I don't know that either way, but I would say that the FAA would certainly encourage you to address that issue. I don't know if it's mandatory. I don't believe it's mandatory. I don't know of a law or a federal regulation that says you have to increase capacity.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Don't forget, we've got copies of the PowerPoint at the back and the handout at the back that has the website and the address for submitting comments. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.